Hello everybody. This is going to be a 5-part lecture all around looking at signs, mostly focused on pictograms, which will be the focus of our next project. So this will be part 1 of the lecture series that I've titled Picture This. Let's get started. All right, so this will be part 1, Introduction. There are 3 basic classifications of depiction as they refer to what we see in nature. So the first one is representational. This would be a rendering attempting to replicate an actual thing as seen in nature so that people can recognize the image. It could also be called pictorial or figurative, right? So representational, the image depicts something in nature. A viewer can look at the image and know what it is representing, okay? The next type of classification of depiction would be abstraction. Abstraction is when you have a rearrangement, an alteration, or a distortion of something that naturally appears. The abstraction can either make the item or the thing more simple or more complex. And abstraction is used for stylistic distinction or for communication purposes. So again, this example of a abstract depiction of a flamingo, I think everyone can still recognize flamingo. There are still enough key elements that we associate with that animal. However, that's definitely not what a flamingo actually looks like. So there's been a bit of abstraction of the form. The third classification is non-representational. So non-representational will be the polar opposite of representational. These are visuals that are purely inventive and they are not derived from anything visually perceived. So it's not something that is literally representing a person, place, or thing. This can also be called non-objective. So again, looking at the 3 examples, non-representational, you have a pink squiggle. As I'm showing it to you here in a series of images that are all clearly trying to depict flamingo, you can make the creative leap that like, okay, it's similar color to flamingo and it is tall or long and thin like flamingo, but that's really as far as you can try to draw the connections. And if you saw just that pink squiggle without the context of flamingo, I don't think anyone would really guess flamingo very quickly or maybe ever, right? So that's a non-representational image depicting flamingo. It doesn't really represent the actual animal, and the viewer needs context to understand the depiction. Okay. So here are 3 more visuals that are all depicting toy fire truck, right? So take a minute and see if you can guess which one would be representational, abstract, and non-representational. Okay, so of these 3 fire trucks, one of them looks very close to the real thing, the one in the center. I think that one is most clearly fire truck. So that would be the representational depiction of fire truck. If I look at the toy on the left, it still has a lot of key components of a fire truck. It has the ladder, it's red, it has some lights and wheels. So again, this is obviously an abstracted version of fire truck, but there are still enough key visual cues that the viewer understands that this toy is still representing fire truck. So that would be your abstract version of fire truck in this toy example, which then leaves you with those two Legos stacked on top of each other on the far right. Again, that's just two red bricks of Lego. There's nothing that says fire truck about that unless you see it in this context of I'm showing you pictures of fire trucks. So the viewer is able to make the visual connection between those two red bricks are representing fire truck in this context. Without the context of this slide and you just had two red bricks, this doesn't mean fire truck. So it's a non-representational depiction of a fire truck. There you go. So hopefully that also sort of helps understand the different ways of classifying how something is being visually depicted. And the overall idea of depiction is under the umbrella term of reductive images, if that is interesting to anybody when you're categorizing what we're talking about in the context of design. Reductive images. All right, so three main classifications of depiction: representational, abstraction, non-representational. Signs and symbols serve many functions in graphic design and in the world. So they could be standalone images, like this pictograph on a restroom door. They could be components of a broader design solution, like this signage system in a national park. And they can also serve as icons in our digital interface. So while the term signs, symbols, and icons are tossed around interchangeably when speaking about different visuals, there are actually differences between the three terms. And you'll learn more about that in graphic design too. But we are really focusing on signs. So a sign is defined as a visual mark that denotes another thing. It can be representational, and when it is, it's often referred to as a pictogram. A sign can also be abstract or non-representational. So it's hard, and I am terrible about it too, about using the right terms. But I will try to make a concerted effort, and you guys should too, that we are going to talk about making signs. We are talking about making a visual mark that denotes another thing. And so here are three examples again. A representational, also called a pictogram, of a soccer ball, right? It looks like a soccer ball, representing a soccer ball. An abstract sign that is probably a very familiar symbol, sign to everybody, handicap sign. So it's an abstract rendering of a person in a wheelchair. And then the third one is a non-representational sign. That is the do not enter road sign that you've probably seen a million times over and never really questioned what it meant, right? Because you're just very familiar with seeing it out there, and a lot of times it'll say no entry or do not enter. So it'll add words to the sign to help communicate what the sign is trying to tell you, since it is a non-representational sign. It doesn't have, a visual depiction of what it wants you to do. So oftentimes non-representational signs will be accompanied with text to help give them context. Okay. So just to reiterate, we are going to be living in representational pictogram land right here. This is where we are going to focus our energy. Just so we're very clear, we're going to create representational signs, aka pictograms. And then for anyone that was curious, a symbol is defined as an image that represents something else, and its meaning is learned through association. So you're probably all familiar with the symbol of a dove holding an olive branch, symbolizes peace. That that shaped thing symbolizes save your file. It is representing actually a floppy disk, which was how files were saved on computers way back at the beginning of computers. But nowadays, no one knows what floppy disks are. You just associate that shape, that symbol, with saving your file. And so again, symbols are images that represent something else, and their meaning is learned. That's really the key part of it, where you can't really guess the meaning of a symbol. You have to be told what the meaning of the symbol is. Versus a sign, just to reiterate, is a visual mark that denotes another thing. And most often, signs are depicted in such a way that the viewer can understand what the sign is trying to tell them quickly and immediately, which is also why most signs are representational or abstract. There are many fewer signs that fall into that non-representational category because they really need text or words to go with the sign to help the viewer understand what the sign is trying to tell them. So that's the difference between signs and symbols. Okay, thus ends part 1 of lecture Picture This.